There are moments when life feels like a loop, a dull, repetitive cycle where each day blends into the next, and every small bad habit builds up like dust in a forgotten corner. For years, that's exactly how I lived. My weekends were filled with alcohol until I could barely stand, and every cigarette I lit felt like a small act of rebellion that only hurt me. I ate nothing that could be called real food. My diet was a mix of processed snacks, canned meals, and greasy takeout. My brain was foggy, my motivation non-existent, and I didn't even realize that my habits were quietly shaping the person I had become. What I didn't understand back then was how interconnected everything truly is. A poor diet dulls the brain. Sedentarism weakens not only the body, but the mind's willpower. Each unhealthy choice feeds the next, creating what scientists call a positive feedback loop, though in this case, there's nothing positive about it. You feel lazy, so you skip exercise. You feel guilty, so you drink. You wake up tired, so you skip breakfast. The loop continues day after day. If you're reading this, maybe you're caught in that same cycle. Maybe you think that change is impossible because you've tried before and failed. But I learned something profound. A few small, deliberate changes can trigger a chain reaction powerful enough to reshape your entire existence. The turning point. I never thought I'd become a productive person. I used to roll my eyes at people who said they loved to optimize their day. I thought productivity was for control freaks. Then, one long weekend, I did something different. Instead of drinking, I spent 3 days studying 8 hours each day. I ate clean food, worked out hard, and slept well. And for the first time, I felt a kind of mental clarity that I hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't magic. It was chemistry. My brain had the nutrients and oxygen it needed to function properly. The more I took care of my body, the sharper my mind became. And that's when I understood something essential. Most of the chaos in our lives is self-created and self-maintained by a few dysfunctional habits that operate on autopilot. I started reading about psychology and neuroscience, and that's when I discovered a principle that changed everything: the Pareto rule. The Pareto principle applied to life. The Pareto principle states that 80% of results come from 20% of causes. In other words, most of what happens in your life is determined by a small fraction of your actions. That also means that if you identify and change the right 20%, you can dramatically improve the other 80%. It's not a law of physics, of course, but the ratio is a powerful metaphor, and it's consistently observed in real life. When I looked at my habits through this lens, the truth hit me hard. My main 20% of destruction came from a few key habits: sedentarism, smoking, drinking excessively, eating poorly. Fixing these would not just improve one area of my life, they would improve everything. Sleep, focus, mood, relationships, and productivity all stem from the same biological system. Once you change the foundation, the structure follows. But here's the catch. Those core habits are also the hardest to break because they're deeply wired into your brain. How habits become hardwired. To understand why change feels impossible, I had to learn how the brain physically stores behavior. In 1949, psychologist Donald Hebb published The Organization of Behavior, introducing what later became known as Hebb's rule. Neurons that fire together, wire together. What that means is simple but profound. Every time you repeat a behavior, whether it's lighting a cigarette, opening Instagram, or hitting snooze, you strengthen the neural pathways that make that behavior automatic. Over time, your brain becomes better at performing that habit, just like a muscle grows with use. Imagine you've been training your bad habits muscle for years. It's strong, well-developed, and easy to activate. Meanwhile, your healthy habits muscle is weak, underused, and sore when you try to move it. That's why quitting smoking or starting to exercise feels unnatural at first. You're not just changing your environment, you're fighting against a neurobiological pattern. But here's the encouraging part. The brain is plastic. It can rewire itself. If neurons can wire together, they can also unwire and then rewire in new, better ways. The key is consistency. Like building muscle, it takes repetition. And you can accelerate this process by creating systems that help your brain make better choices automatically. Step 1. Understanding rule-based behavior. Every human behavior follows a set of rules. Some are external, like a red traffic light forcing you to stop. But many are internal, created by your own mind. These internal rules often sound like this. If I eat something unhealthy, I've already ruined my diet, so I'll just start again on Monday. If I skip one workout, the week's already lost. If I don't go out this weekend, I'm missing something important. These rules are illusions, arbitrary stories that the brain invents to justify immediate comfort. They're survival mechanisms gone wrong. And because we repeat them, they become neurological truths. To change your life, you first need to identify your implicit rules, the invisible narratives controlling your behavior. Ask yourself, what beliefs am I obeying without realizing it? Once you identify them, you can start replacing them with conscious, structured systems that work for you instead of against you. Step 2. Building external systems. The power of a simple agenda. When I first heard that keeping an agenda could transform my life, I laughed. It sounded childish, like using a school planner. But then I realized something. If the brain is bad at self-regulation, why not use a tool outside the brain to do the regulation for me? A written agenda is what neuroscientists might call an extracortical mechanism of behavioral modulation. In simple terms, it's an external brain. It holds your rules, your commitments, and your priorities, freeing your actual brain from chaos. When you rely only on memory and motivation, you fail. Motivation is unstable. Memory is selective. But an agenda creates external accountability. It's a contract between you and your future self. Here, how I started. I listed my daily tasks and gave them importance levels using color codes. I defined a success threshold of 70%. If I completed 70% of the tasks, the day was a win. I built momentum by focusing first on the tasks that mattered most to my goals. This small framework changed everything. Suddenly, my brain didn't need to decide what to do next. It just had to follow a plan. Decision fatigue dropped. Procrastination faded. And over time, sticking to the agenda became a habit in itself. The psychology behind it. The human brain loves structure. When you obey the schedule you created, you trigger dopamine release, the same neurotransmitter involved in reward and motivation. Over time, completing your tasks becomes addictive in the best possible way. But there's another side to this: discomfort. For an agenda to work, not following it must feel worse than following it. Missing a workout should sting a little. Not writing those 10 pages should feel like you're betraying yourself. That emotional discomfort becomes the new punishment that keeps your behavior in check. And before you think this sounds too harsh, remember, every system of discipline relies on both reward and punishment. Without both, the brain loses balance. The punishment doesn't need to be external. It's enough to feel mild regret or unease, just enough to remind you that you value progress. Rebuilding from the ground up. In the beginning, your attempts to change will feel weak. Just like lifting weights for the first time, your neural muscles for discipline will fatigue quickly. That's normal. What matters is the repetition. Every time you choose to follow your agenda, every time you resist an unhealthy rule, you're reinforcing new circuits. Over time, those circuits will dominate. The old habits, the ones connected to laziness, excess, or avoidance, will atrophy. This is how real transformation happens, not in giant leaps, but in microscopic rewiring. You don't destroy the old you overnight, you overwrite it, line by line, neuron by neuron. The cascade effect. Eventually, you'll notice that small wins begin to echo across your life. You start eating better, and suddenly your sleep improves. You exercise, and your focus at work sharpens. You follow your agenda, and suddenly you have more free time than before. That's the cascade effect. Each improved habit strengthens others, and soon the feedback loop that once destroyed you now builds you. The system that once enslaved you becomes the system that sustains you. At that point, you no longer chase motivation, you rely on discipline. You no longer hope to be productive, you simply are. You no longer need to force healthy habits, they've become part of who you are. The real reward. ultimate reward of changing your habits isn't just health or productivity, it's freedom. Freedom from your own compulsions, from the invisible rules that kept you stuck. Freedom to wake up clear-minded, energized, and capable of choosing your path. And that freedom comes from something simple yet powerful: understanding how your brain works and designing your life accordingly. You don't need 1,000 strategies or expensive programs. You just need to identify your destructive 20%, replace your self-sabotaging rules, and use external tools like an agenda to reprogram your behavior. It's not easy, but it is simple, and it works. Final thought. When I look back at who I was, a woman lost in self-destruction, convinced that everyone else was the problem, I feel a mix of shame and gratitude. Shame for the years wasted, gratitude for the lesson learned. Change starts with awareness, but it only lasts with structure. If your life feels stagnant, remember this: you're not broken. You're just following the wrong rules, strengthening the wrong circuits. Start small. Move one domino. Fix 20% and watch the other 80% fall into place. The cascade of change begins not with a revolution, but with a choice. One habit, one rule, one day. And from there, everything unfolds.